Well, good morning, everybody. Happy New Year and welcome to the Built Heritage Committee meeting of January 22nd, 2026. I'd like to call the members to order. This hybrid meeting is being facilitated through Zoom and is being held on the traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation, the original custodians of the unceded land in which the city of Ottawa is located. We extend our respect to all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples for their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Since this committee meeting is being streamed live on the Ottawa City Council YouTube channel, I'd like to remind participants to please keep your microphones muted until I call upon you to speak. For those participating here in the committee room, please use the microphone in front of you and keep your computer muted. I would provide each committee member with the opportunity to ask questions or comment on each item in the order in which they raise their hand in Zoom. For panelists, the raise hand option is found at the bottom of the participants list. For those calling in, press *9 to raise your hand. The committee coordinator and I will be watching for those cues. Members are also reminded to submit any motions, visual supports, or declarations of interest in writing to the coordinator at their earliest opportunity. Although the deadlines have passed for residents to register to speak and provide written submissions to this committee, residents can still make written submissions to council. A reminder that if participants are having technical issues with their Zoom connection, they may call in using the backup telephone number provided by the coordinator. I've received no regrets, and we're happy to welcome Councillor Foster.
AGM, good morning. Apologies.
Not at all. Could the committee coordinator call the roll?
Councillor Kelly.
Present.
Councillor Leeper.
Good morning.
Councillor Troster.
Here.
Member Borns.
Present.
Member Legault.
Present.
Member Madigan.
Present.
Member Quinn.
Present.
Vice President Plante.
Allô.
And Chair King.
Here.
You have quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. We now can move forward with our meeting. Are there any declarations of interest? None have been filed, and seeing none, are the minutes of the Built Heritage meeting of December 9th confirmed?
Confirmed.
Confirmed. Thank you so much. So I will proceed with the consent agenda for our substantive items this morning. Our first item is consideration of objection to the notice of intention to designate the Lausanne House at 6654 Notre Dame Street under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. There are no delegations, though we did receive correspondence from Heritage, Ottawa, and others. Is it the will of the committee to hold this item? Seeing none, is this item carried? Carried.
Carried.
This report will be submitted to council on January 28th, 2026. Our next item is consideration of objection of the notice of intention to designate 158 Gloucester Street under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. There are no delegations. We did receive correspondence from Heritage Ottawa. Is it the will of committee to hold this item? Seeing none, is this item carried?
Carried.
Thank you. So this report will be submitted to council on January 28th, 2026. Our next item is application to alter 290 Park Road, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act as part of the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. We do have a registered speaker. So Andre Godin of Andre Godin Design is here to answer any questions on behalf of the applicant if required, but has stated that there isn't a need for a formal delegation. So is it the will of the committee to hold this item? Okay. So we will hold that item for presentation and questions. The next item is an application for alterations to 231 Buena Vista Road, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. We do have registered delegations from Elmwood School, including the architects. I just wanted to ask the delegations whether you would like to speak if committee is willing to move this application forward. And I see heads nodding in the negative to that. So the delegates won't be providing comments. In terms of this item, is it the will of committee to hold this item? Seeing no interest, is the item carried?
Carried.
Carried. So this report will be submitted to council on January 28th, 2026. Our next item will be the Beaverbrook Heritage Conservation District feasibility assessment, and we will have a presentation on that item. And there will also be a presentation on the Heritage Watch List update. Sorry. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And just for the edification of the committee, we just wanted to point out that in items 4.1 and 4.2, it was unnecessary to approve the third item that talks about suspending the notice required under subsections 29.3 and 34.1 of the procedure bylaw to consider these reports at the meeting of January 26, 2026 to decide the matter within the legislative timeline. So those items had been removed. So we now go back to item 4.3, an application to alter 290 Park Road, and I'll ask staff to provide a presentation.
Good morning, Chair King, Vice Chair Plant, and committee members. Today I'll be giving a brief presentation on staff's recommendation to approve the application to alter 290 Park Road, a Grade 1 property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act, located in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. Next slide, please. The building at 290 Park is located at the intersection of Springfield and Park Roads. The building is 2.5 stories and was constructed in 1931. The building's primary facade faces north onto Park Road. The building is clad in stucco, has an intersecting gable roof line, irregular diamond-leaded windows, and a single-car garage at the rear that faces east onto Springfield Road. The property features a large rear yard to the south and mature trees and hedges on the east and west sides along Springfield Road. It also features an asphalt driveway facing Springfield. Next slide. The heritage permit application is for the demolition of the 1-story garage that faces Springfield Road. The garage will be replaced with a 2.5-story addition that has a double-car garage with living space above. The addition will be clad in stucco, have decorative wood and copper accents, and an asphalt roof. The garage doors are proposed to be wood, and all new windows will match the existing building in terms of material and glass divisions. Next slide. This slide shows a render and elevation drawing of the proposed addition. There are minimal changes planned for the existing building, with none on the Park Road facade. The changes on the Springfield facade, as seen on this slide, include shifting the Springfield Road entrance door and windows to the new addition. Landscape changes include reconfiguring the driveway to align with the new double garage. The reconfiguration necessitates the removal of a portion of the hedge along Springfield Road, and this partial removal has been assessed by an arborist who has confirmed that the removal will not impact the overall health of the hedge. The arborist recommends planting two new white cedars in its location. Next slide. So here is a render of the rear facade. The proposal has been reviewed against the policies and guidelines for alterations and additions in the Rockcliffe Park HCD plan, and staff have determined that the proposal is compliant and consistent with the policies of the plan. Next slide. Heritage Ottawa and the Rockcliffe Park Residents Associations were notified of this application and were offered the opportunity to provide comments. The RPRA provided written comments to staff and the applicant, and no major concerns were raised, and the comments were generally in line with staff's. Neighbors within 60 meters of the property were also notified of the application, and a notice sign was posted on the subject property by the applicant on December 13th, 2025. Next slide. So overall, staff are recommending approval of the application to alter 290 Park Road. Staff also recommend delegating the minor design changes to the program manager of the Heritage Planning Branch and to issue the heritage permit with a 2-year expiry date from the date of issuance. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Now questions to potentially the delegation and staff. Member Legault.
Thank you. I think this is a great project, and I think my comments are very fine-grained. So generally, I think this is successful. And if you'll allow me, I'll do a mini review of the standards and guidelines against this project. So the 3 guidelines or the 3 standards that I am concerned about for this rehabilitation project, and that it's in addition to the main form and massing of the building, are standard 1, 4, and 11. So conserve the value of the original form and massing of the primary building. 4, part B, so creating no false sense of false historical development. And standard 11, as we're always concerned for additions, compatible with, subordinate to, and distinguishable from. So I think this addition, if we look at it immediately from standard 11, it is compatible with, it is subordinate to for sure, because it's off of that main facade, right? Your primary facade on Park Road is preserved, and that's excellent. So it is subordinate. I just question how distinguishable from it is from that primary form and massing. And I say that, I layer that with standard 4 because your windows, as you see from the application, you're reusing them, right? So you're reusing some of the windows in that new addition, which kind of confuses things, right? Because if you're, like when I looked at this project, the very first thing I did, which perhaps is equivalent to reading the finale of a book, is I looked at the renderings. And, you know, I think that that's probably a good way to start for this committee, because we are being asked to evaluate the building for its exterior form and massing. And I couldn't understand what the intervention was. So to me, that new addition is not distinguishable from the original massing. And if you look at this intervention, you know, in 20, 50, 100 years from now, where there's walking tours through Rockcliffe Park, and you know, architectural historians are going around and describing the architectural style, will an architectural historian be able to clearly illustrate to members of the public that that rear extension is new? Because you've got reused windows, right? And you don't have a clear delineation between the original form and the new one. So I think it's an easy fix, right? Like, I'm not asking for like a bridge or a causeway between the new and the old. I think it just needs to have a material change. I don't think it should be in yellow stucco. I think it should be in something else, which the designer should decide. And that, I think, will clarify the reuse of the windows. I don't necessarily think that the new windows should be leaded, like with the glass sort of diagonal cuts, because that is kind of leaning towards a false historical development, right? They're not original, they're new. And I say this because like this is like really fine grain. And I think the interior works, and we're not here to talk about the interior space, but I think that it would be nice to have that distinction, because otherwise we start bleeding into this territory of 19th, 20th century farmhouses where you can't actually tell what the addition was, right? And you have to have historians go in to see what the new and the old material is. So that's my criticism of this project. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay.
Can I just make a quick comment? Sorry. I don't entirely disagree. That being said, I think the standards and guidelines provide for a wide range of solutions. And I think in this instance, when we look at the massing of the proposed addition. It is inset with that new entrance, and that is being seen as kind of distinguishing the two massings of the original building from the new. Yeah, exactly. So I don't disagree. And those who've been on this committee for a while will remember this standard 11 discussion from the Chateau Laurier, for instance, that there are, many choices that a designer can make. And it's from staff's perspective, our approach is to evaluate whether or not this is generally compliant with the Heritage Conservation District Plan rather than dictating the sort of subjectivities of design too much. So we walk a fine line there. And so in this instance, from our perspective, the lower roof line and the inset massing sort of satisfy the standard 11 concern, but I do see your point, and it may be a question to the architect for this project.
Yeah, and like maybe it's not even change of stucco, it could still be stucco, but I mean, really, if they're going to be doing the exact same yellow stucco on that addition as the original building, it's going to be kind of a scenario where you paint half your ceiling, right? They're probably going to end up painting the whole thing, and then it's going to become this homogeneous new massing, right? So if it's a new material, then you're very deliberately conserving the value of that original form. And it could be even like a stucco with a different texture. It could be so simple as that. But to really drive home that distinguishable aspect, I think that brings kind of this project from like a 90% to 100%. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the questions and comments. Member Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think at this juncture, I'm going to respectfully disagree with my colleague on the committee. I think, as to the point of Ms. Collins, this is a guideline, and I think also this is a building that's part of a Part 5 designation. It's not a Part 4. It's not a landmark building. It is a building that the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association have made very clear how they want in their guidelines, how homogeneity is very important to that community. And I think we're down in the weeds here when we're asking for changes to stucco texture on the side of a building that is not even, part of the front facade perspective. And I've had many many challenges over the years with Standard 11, and I'm not wedded to it personally. And I think, in fact, the owners should be commended for reusing existing windows from an environmental and ecological perspective. And I'm fully supportive of this project as it has been presented to us today. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Member Borns.
Well, I just wanted to agree with the previous speaker and indicate that I really appreciate efforts to make buildings compatible with the old building. So for instance, the change on James Street where they moved a door and built a porch and yet made the whole thing look exactly like an old building is excellent and is something that should be tried. My concern here is, do we know how much it would have cost to process the application, from the applicant's point of view?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, do you mean the cost of the application? Like how much they had to pay the city, or?
No, I mean how much it cost them to process an application because this was a heritage area.
I can't speak to their costs in terms of architecture and that sort of thing. The only thing I can speak to is the application fee that they would have had to pay to the city of Ottawa.
I know that housing is a major barrier. You know, the costs of going through our process is a major barrier. And it would be interesting to find out how much this adds to the cost.
And I'm certain that we'd be able to provide you with that information through staff. If not immediately, they'll be able to correspond with you on that. Though this is slightly off topic, of course, council has been working through its housing acceleration plan and through several initiatives to attempt to reduce red tape, and are fully examining how we can reduce the costs of applications. So that work is being undertaken by council, of course, in our affiliated committee, planning and housing. Of course, this has also been a topic of discussion of the wider council, but we just want you to know that, and I'm certain that staff will be able to ultimately provide the costs of the application fees.
Mr. Chair, this application would have been approximately $2,500 for the applicant to submit. Again, I can't speak to what their costs are associated with hiring architects, et cetera. I would also note that this is not adding any additional housing units. This is an expansion of a single family dwelling.
Thank you so much. And I see that Member Madigan also has his hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. I agree actually with a number of my colleagues here. There's an aspect of making things distinguishable, but for this project, I think overall the end result is successful for the site and for the neighborhood. You can go the full range, in my opinion, for very, very distinguishable with your addition to more harmonized with the existing architecture. But I think for this project, it seems to work. I have my own minor sort of quibbles with the door could perhaps be more accentuated like the original door. The aspect of reusing the existing window or in a new location, we're currently struggling with that on projects, and this aspect of the circular economy, reusing existing materials, and we're speaking to a bit of an evolution in sort of heritage thinking of trying to keep reusing what we have, and even if it's not in the original location. So anyway, my sort of aspect of this is overall successful, and for this project, but another project where you will go perhaps a different way. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Legault.
Yes, I do think that the reuse of the windows is important and good and sustainable, and that should be done. I just think it would be more successful if it was clearly in an addition that was clearly new. So I stand by my comments. But I can understand what my colleagues are saying. And I also, premise this with saying that this is a very fine grain, in the weeds, conversation that I think is valuable to have, especially at this committee when we're only really being asked to comment on the form and massing often. So.
And we definitely appreciate your comments, and I appreciate the discussion that we've had on this file this morning. Seeing no other hands raised, is this item carried?
Carried. Carried.
So much. So this report will be submitted to council on January 28th, 2026. Our next item is the Beaverbrook Heritage Conservation District feasibility assessment, and we will have a presentation from staff.
Good morning. So yes, as mentioned, I'll be presenting on the Beaverbrook Heritage Conservation District feasibility assessment today. And next slide, please. So the committee will be familiar with the background on feasibility assessments generally, but in 2024, Heritage staff were directed to complete HCD feasibility assessments for 5 areas, including Beaverbrook as part of our long-term work planning post Bill 23. So next slide, please. So Beaverbrook is a suburban neighborhood in Canada. It's located just outside the western edge of the NCC Greenbelt and was constructed primarily in the mid-1960s. So Beaverbrook was identified as a feasibility assessment area for several reasons. First being the longstanding community interest in seeking designation here, and second being a previous council direction to consider designation for the area. Being outside the city's kind of inner core, it also supports the Heritage Planning Branch's goal of expanding the geographic diversity of our heritage designation program. So next slide, please. So we'll move into looking at the actual results and work put into the feasibility assessment. So as has been the case with all of these assessments, we take a two-pronged approach, looking at both the historical background and physical character of the area, combined with a high-level evaluation of the province's designation criteria and how those apply to the area. So next slide, please. So starting off with the historical review, just to give a quick overview of its background. So what is now Beaverbrook was once part of March Township, one of the former municipalities, which eventually formed part of the city of Canada. So starting in the 1950s, Bill Tarrant, who was a fairly notable and prolific developer in Ottawa's mid-century and recent history, he started to assemble a number of land holdings in March Township outside the then newly established Greenbelt. And he acquired approximately, oh, pardon me. Just close it. And he acquired approximately 3,200 acres by 1960 in March Township. So next slide, please. Bill Tarrant is a really interesting figure in Ottawa's history. He was never trained as an architect or a designer, but he found great success as a designer and developer in the kind of immediate post-war era, winning a number of National Design Council awards and even receiving the Order of Canada in 1982. In the 1950s and 1960s, Tarrant was frustrated with the sort of situation and direction of suburban development in Canada and sought to advance kind of innovation in new housing approaches. So he traveled around the world for a short time, researching and visiting kind of new developments and new housing approaches, and was inspired to plan what he called a satellite city on his lands in March Township. So this idea took cues from a number of 19th and 20th century planning developments and planning movements, such as things like the Garden City concept, the New Towns movement, and even a number of ideas contained in the federal government's Grey Bear plan for the National Capital Region. So at its core, Tarrant really wanted to plan a self-sustaining city, not just a suburb of Ottawa, that was integrated with its natural surroundings and provided for the majority of its residents' needs. So next slide, please. In line with that idea, Tarrant planned this satellite city at different scales, starting with clusters, so small groupings of 50 or so houses, and moving up from there. So neighborhoods were identified as areas with 800 houses, communities were 2 to 5 neighborhoods, and towns were 2 to 5 of these communities kind of clustered together. So his idea was that this satellite city would appeal to families. One of Tarrant's most well-known design ideas in Beaverbrook is this concept of designing a neighborhood accessible to a child on a tricycle. The idea was also that this would appeal to businesses. So Tarrant planned his residential component, and he also set aside lands for a technology park adjacent to these residential components, which today forms part of the Canada North Technology Park. And next slide, please. So in terms of early development, the first subdivision plans were approved by March Township in 1964, and construction started that same year. Subsequent subdivision plans were approved throughout the 1960s and into the 1970s. And Atomic Energy of Canada Limited, which was a crown corporation of the federal government, was the first occupant in the adjacent tech park around 1965. And many more followed pretty soon after that. And on your right there, you can see an excerpt from the original subdivision plan, number 768. And next slide, please. So despite Tarrant's kind of influence here, his role as the sole developer in Beaverbrook was fairly brief. In 1967, the Power Corporation, which was a large developer based in Montreal, acquired a stake in the development with the ability to buy out Tarrant's interests. He took over a role as president of one of their subsidiaries and was still the overseer of development, but Power Corporation ultimately had final oversight and final say. By 1971, that relationship became a bit strained, and Power Corporation bought out Tarrant, shifting control of the remaining development to Campo Corporation, another Ottawa developer, which they had acquired in the 1960s. So development of the remainder of Beaverbrook was completed in the following years, without the role of Bill Tarrant in its final form. And you can see on the right there, that's an aerial image from 1971, which shows basically the completed build out of Beaverbrook at that time. And next slide, please. So we'll shift gears here a little bit now to look at the character overview. So Beaverbrook features a range of residential typologies, predominantly single detached, but also semi-detached apartment style and townhouses and row houses throughout. Taryn envisioned a range of housing options for different needs, being a prominent feature of his satellite city. And that's reflected in the building stock throughout. Most are designed in, for the purposes of this feasibility assessment, what we've coined sort of a Terran-style mid-century modern architectural expression. It draws on a lot of the forms common in different suburban typologies from that time period, but applies them in sort of a simplified way with kind of modern design sensibilities and primarily natural cladding materials such as wood and dark colored brick, etc. And next slide, please. And here you can just see a number of images that also showcase the different types of housing found within Beaverbrook. So we have sort of larger scale apartment buildings, split levels, and also row houses and condo, kind of low scale condo buildings as well. And next slide, please. So just as important as the architecture, landscape and the public realm features of Beaverbrook are also very significant to its character. As I mentioned before, Taryn was really interested in making sure that nature was integrated into this development, into the sort of satellite city concept. And notable features include the very large and consistent landscape front yards, as well as the integrated park-like walking paths, which connect the different residential clusters between each other and link things like schools and commercial areas, et cetera, within the neighborhood. These features really contribute to that vision of being associated and integrated with nature, and also being scaled for people, for access by people who are young and old both. And next slide, please. So now we'll quickly move into the criteria review. So just as a quick refresher, in terms of how heritage conservation districts are designated in Ontario, HCDs can be designated if 25% of properties in an area meet 2 or more of the 9 criteria set out in Ontario Regulation 0906, which you can see on the screen there. And next slide, please. So when we undertake the criteria review for feasibility assessments specifically, we look at the area as a whole and evaluate its potential to meet that 25% threshold on a high, medium, and low scale. And next slide, please. So for Beaverbrook, we found that the area has high potential to meet 4 of the province's designation criteria, criteria 1, 4, 6, and 7. And I'll just go over each briefly. So next slide, please. So looking at criteria 1, this criteria speaks to the design value of the area. And as we discussed earlier, the buildings and building stock in Beaverbrook have high potential to meet this criteria, being representative of a very specific sort of architectural expression of mid-century modernism. And next slide, please. For criteria 4 and 6, these both speak to the associative value of the property or properties in an area. As we mentioned, the association with Bill Taryn is very notable. He is a very prolific and well-known figure in Ottawa's kind of recent history. But there's a number of other associations that are also interesting here. Beaverbrook is the first development in what eventually became the city of Canada, now a neighborhood of now a part of the city of Ottawa. And there's a deep association with the kind of growing role through the late 20th century of Ottawa as a important tech hub within Canada as well. That's very associated with Taryn's development of the adjacent Canada Technology Park. And next slide, please. And then finally, for criteria 7, because of the very specific design intent of the entire area, the properties have very high potential to meet criteria 7 for both defining, maintaining, and supporting the character of that area. And next slide, please. So just to start wrapping up here, in terms of findings of the feasibility assessment, Beaverbrook has very high potential to meet the test for designation as a heritage conservation district. Through the feasibility assessment, we did find that an expanded boundary for an HCD study would be appropriate, and that was based on feedback we received from members of the public and also from the ward councillor. So you can see on the screen there the kind of recommended HCD study boundary that's contained within the feasibility assessment report. And next slide, please. The feasibility assessment also found that there should be a fairly extensive internal consultation that would happen associated with the future HCD study. There's a number of features that are significant to the character of Beaverbrook that are either contained within the city's right-of-way or are sort of difficult or not typically regulated through a heritage conservation district. So things like the maintenance of hedges and some of the associated landscape elements around the walking paths, and also the illuminated street lighting and signage that's very unique to the area. So we want to ensure that those are considered very explicitly throughout whatever future HCD study process may happen. And then sort of similar to other feasibility assessments, given the kind of balance between the values of the sort of physical building stock and also the actual landscape elements, HCD plan policies should be looked at to be scoped in line with community interests and sort of the actual needs of the specific properties. So considering things like no permit requirements for basic alterations such as window replacement due to the age and the kind of typologies that are common there. And next slide, please. Finally, just in terms of the actual recommendations of the staff report, we are recommending that we proceed with the Heritage Conservation District study for Beaverbrook. And next slide, please. And then just quickly to review consultation, we did conduct an online survey associated with this Heritage Conservation District feasibility assessment. In total, we received about 232 responses. In addition, the Canada Beaverbrook Community Association and the ward councillor are aware of the recommendations of this report. And next slide, please. And then in terms of next steps, if recommended to proceed, we will be likely proceeding with a Heritage Conservation District study starting in either Q4 of this year or Q1 of next year. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that in-depth presentation and frankly for the hard work on this assessment. We really do appreciate it as a committee. We don't have any delegations on this item. We did receive a correspondence from Heritage Ottawa. Are there any questions from the committee? Member Borns.
What areas were added as a consequence of the discussions?
If I could get the slides actually back up, I can show you specifically. And if we could just go to slide 3. So this is the original feasibility assessment area that was approved by council. And then if we move to slide 19, that's where the updated recommended study area is. So essentially, it's kind of the northeast corner. And the reason for this was through some consultation with the community association and feedback received through the survey. It was identified that a lot of the community members actually found that the multi-residential buildings contained within here and some of the commercial were actually equally important to their perception of the character of Beaverbrook as the single detached building. So we wanted to include that within the HCD study to make sure that those areas were considered in line with the single attached.
I noticed both versions include a number of schools. Would that require someone to submit an application to put a portable in?
Ultimately, and thank you for the question. Ultimately, it would depend on the policies and guidelines of a future HCD plan. However, we have an opportunity right now where these are all going to be kind of actively developed through the HCD study process. So we could carve out exceptions for things like that. That would not be uncommon. We've seen that in other instances in the city.
So if a homeowner was to put in a pool, would that require an application?
We don't have any policies developed specifically at this point. This is just a recommendation to proceed with the Heritage Conservation District study. I would imagine that given the kind of character defining elements that have been identified through this process, that there would either be a specific exception for pools or very, very limited requirements for pools, probably in line with what happens in Rockcliffe Park, where the pool enclosure is typically the only thing that's actually permitted. They're actually required to go through a permitting process.
And what were the results of the survey?
So in total, we received about 232 responses. And in general, I think about 75 to 80% were very strongly supportive of exploring heritage conservation in the area. There were some specific feedback regarding kind of specific carve-outs like we've alluded to in this presentation. So things like not requiring permits for window replacement, door replacement, that sort of thing, but leaning to requirements for things like demolition or new construction.
So what's the purpose of this particular application?
So the purpose of this report is to seek direction from council to proceed with the Heritage Conservation District study.
What would the purpose of the Heritage Conservation District be?
The overall purpose of the conservation district itself, just to clarify?
Yes.
To conserve the heritage value of Beaverbrook if the overall evaluation suggests that it meets the criteria for designation under the Ontario Heritage Act.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I just really wanted to once again thank, as chair of Built Heritage Committee, and acknowledge the work of Heritage planning staff on this feasibility assessment. This report represents an important milestone, I think, in Ottawa's heritage conservation efforts. Beaverbrook is not just another neighborhood. It is Canada's founding community and a tangible expression of mid-20th century urban planning principles that shape our entire region. The feasibility assessment demonstrates that Beaverbrook has high potential to meet the Ontario Heritage Act's criteria for designation, and you've demonstrated that through examining design value, historical value, and contextual value, which we heard in your excellent report. We also heard in terms of questions, the fact that the community has responded in good numbers and that there was a significant level of engagement showing majority support for heritage conservation efforts. And I think we're undertaking the right approaches, but we know that this is, and I want to acknowledge this, we know that this will be a large and complex undertaking because there's over 800 properties across 5.5 hectares, and staff will need to evaluate each property against the designation criteria. So we do acknowledge that's a tremendous amount of work, but we think it's very important work to ensure that the cultural heritage value of Beaverbrook, as you have noted in your report, would most likely be best conserved through its designation as a heritage conservation district. So once again, I just really want to thank you for this presentation, for the hard work and that you've undertaken in the assessment, and the harder work that we know that you'll engage in terms of the study if this item is approved by this committee. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you so much. So this report will be submitted to council on January 28th, 2026. Our last substantive item is the presentation on the Heritage Watch List update. Yes, and we'll ask the committee to receive this presentation without a report. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I'll just wait for the slides to come up. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here today to provide one of our twice yearly updates to this committee about the Heritage Watch List, which we've, I think, now got onto a bit of a routine, which is, I think, beneficial for everybody. Next slide, please. So just to give you a sense of what I'd like to chat about today, I want to give you a bit of an update on the status of the watch list, some recent initiatives we've been working on, some property-specific updates. So I've picked several of the properties that you will all be familiar with to give you the latest on, and then talk a little bit about our upcoming work. And I will say I'm joined on the call, if there are questions. I have Scott Lockhart from Building Code Services here on the call. And unfortunately, our bylaw and regulatory services colleagues couldn't be available today, but if there are questions for them, I can take them back for sure. Next slide, please. So the status of the watch list, there are currently 40 properties on the watch list. Since our May 2025 update, we have removed 7 properties from the list. In good news, I think, all but one of those were removed because they are occupied or have been renovated. And one exception being 501 Cole Avenue, which was removed because it is no longer designated under the Ontario Heritage Act due to an Ontario Land Tribunal hearing. The photo on the slide here actually is 460 Wilbrod. This is one of the properties that has been on the list almost since the very beginning. It had some very unfortunate alterations undertaken, and we've worked very hard with the property owner and bylaw and regulatory services to get the owner to be compliant, which included restoration of the red brick on the front of the building, which had been coated in stucco. So the building is now occupied and has been removed from the list. No properties have been added since our last update, which again is a positive thing, and 10 of the properties remain on the list that are foreign owned. None of these properties have diplomatic status, but they are owned by foreign governments. Next slide, please. So in terms of recent initiatives, what we've been working on, we did full inspections of all properties on the watch list in November 2025. We have initiated this as a joint inspection that we are organizing over the course of a couple of days, twice a year, with staff from Heritage Planning, Bylaw and Regulatory Services, and Building Code Services, and Taylor Quibel on my team, who has been extremely helpful on this initiative, kind of coordinates everybody and makes a map, and they go and see every single property. And as a result of those visits, a number of orders and notices of violation and that sort of thing have been issued for a range of things, from minor issues like graffiti to more significant issues, like roofing problems or masonry issues, that sort of thing. So this is something that we have found to be very useful. This is the second round that we've done like this, and we are going to continue this on a twice yearly basis as a group. You may remember we introduced the Centertown Facade Improvement Program back last summer. This is not specific to the watch list, but it is helping us try to encourage some investment in some of these properties that are on the watch list in this area. And so we're monitoring that as part of the pilot to see what kind of outcomes we are getting in the Bank Street, Somerset Village kind of corridor, to see if this is something that could potentially be expanded more broadly. And then finally, we've kind of internally looked at our procedures and come up with a renewed kind of shared procedures document between the 3 groups. We are definitely one city, one team, but it can definitely be challenging to coordinate amongst each other sometimes. And so we've really worked hard on this, and it's just about finished. But so the regular inspection schedule, the regularly scheduled meetings that are coordinated with the inspection schedule, a shared procedures document, and just better communications, even through things like a Teams chat for the watch list, so that everybody who needs to know knows all the things right away. So trying to implement some kind of simple tools internally to make the process a bit more smooth. So from here on, I'm going to go through a few of the kind of high-profile properties, give you an update on what's new with those. If there are any specific properties that I don't talk about that committee members have questions on, I will do my very best to answer those as well. Next slide, please. So the first up is 114 Richmond Road. Just to remind the committee members who may not have known, this property was part of bankruptcy proceedings related to Ashcroft. The property has now been sold to a new owner. That sale, I don't think, has fully closed yet, but the new owner has engaged an engineer to review the building condition and is working collaboratively with Heritage Planning staff and Building Code Services staff in terms of the outstanding order on the property related to a condition assessment. We are anticipating a new development proposal for this site sometime in 2026. So that will come forward to this committee for review when the time comes. So this is, I think, trending in the right direction, I hope. Next slide, please. This property at 330 Gilmore Street, we have an outstanding order on this property related to a building condition assessment. City staff were in the process of contracting out this building condition assessment last fall. However, the owner did agree to complete the report. So staff provided some guidance to the engineer that was hired by the owner of the property on what exactly we were looking for. The draft report was received just last week. It has identified some urgent issues that require pedestrian protection along Lewis Street from fall hazards related to some of the masonry work on the building, and that repair work cannot be completed until the spring. So the city has excuse me, I've lost my train of thought. The city has advised the property owner that the fencing along Lewis Street must be installed by the end of the day tomorrow, weather permitting. And we are working with our colleagues in bylaw and right-of-way to ensure that to ensure that all of the appropriate approvals and permits are in place. If the owner does not install the fencing themselves, the city will be undertaking this work in the coming days. The goal for this fencing is to not obstruct the sidewalk for too long. I mean, any time is too long, but in the period between now and the spring, the goal is to start to take action towards the corrective work. So there is masonry work that needs to be completed in order to prevent the pedestrian hazard of falling bricks and stones, and that cannot be completed until the weather is permitting. If the repairs are not completed by the owner in the spring, the city will be taking action to undertake this work on their behalf. And I should also say the issues around fencing are sort of immediate issues. The building condition assessment that we've received as a draft at this point identifies a wide variety of other issues that we haven't kind of gone through yet, but that will be something we will be working through over the winter to determine if additional orders need to be issued related to the conservation of this property. Next slide, please. 325 Elgin Street. This is Église Saint-Marc at the corner of Elgin and Lewis. Members may remember this tower, which collapsed or started to collapse in, I think it was 2021. The church has been vacant since COVID, basically. And the city approved through this committee dismantling of the tower and stabilization of what was remaining. So what you see today as remaining in 2023. The owner entered into an easement agreement with the city committing to doing this work. This work was never undertaken. And so in the fall of 2025, the city provided notice to the owner that they were in default of the easement agreement that they had entered into with us, and that we would be starting to undertake the stabilization work and to remove the temporary construction encroachment from the city's right-of-way. And so in December 2025, we started phase one of this work, which was to move the structural supports off of the city's right-of-way and onto the property owner's land, as well as the construction of a temporary roof, which you can see in this photo, to prevent further weather damage to the masonry, the remaining masonry of the tower. We are currently in the planning phase for phase two of this work, which will be stabilization of the remaining masonry, including repointing, which is to take place in the spring. We have an upcoming meeting with the property owner to discuss this work. And I should note that all the costs associated with all of this work will be recovered from the property owner. Next slide, please. 173 Huntmar. This property, we have an outstanding order requiring roof repairs, graffiti removal, etc. We are working collaboratively with the owner. They've hired a conservation architect to help with plans for the building. We've been working with them particularly on the roof, which you see in this photo. as there is a hole in the roof that needs to be repaired. They have been working on this over the course of the last few weeks. Unfortunately, the weather has not been super cooperative to be doing roofing in January. So we are in ongoing conversations with them to try to prevent further damage through ensuring tarping, et cetera, until weather permits a more permanent solution. And then we have also agreed with them that over the course of the winter, we are going to meet to talk about all the other work that needs to be done. That again is not sort of urgent, immediate work, but is work that needs to be undertaken in order to ensure the long-term conservation of this building. Next slide, please. And Somerset House, 352 Somerset Street West. So you may remember the foundation permit was issued in the fall of 2025. Work is expected to begin again next month on this foundation project. The above grade permit is ready for issuance for the remainder of the project, and the redevelopment is expected to take a few years. So we expect that there may be some stops and starts in the work, but work is happening, and that's a positive thing. And then the last property, so next slide, please. This is a group of properties which you may remember, 227 to 237 St. Patrick Street. This committee and council approved demolition of these buildings in September 2024 based on engineering assessments that the condition of the building was critical. The owner has not fulfilled the conditions associated with that heritage permit, which was to enter into an agreement with the city to ensure interim landscaping of the property once demolition was complete, as well as prohibiting interim use of the property until such a time that redevelopment occurred. The condition of the bill, and the owner has also taken no further steps towards demolition of these buildings. The condition of the buildings has continued to deteriorate since September 2024, and Building Code Services has issued orders to remedy unsafe building yesterday, as of January 21st, 2026. If the owner is non-compliant with these orders, the city will undertake this demolition on their behalf. I just want to flag for this committee that if that is the case, we may need a motion at this committee related to the conditions of the heritage permit around landscaping, because the city cannot enter into an agreement with itself. So we may be back at the next meeting, depending on compliance by the owner of this property. And so we can, I can explain that better the next time around, but I just want to give the committee a heads up. So that's sort of the tour of buildings that I wanted to provide the committee today. I will say, I think, some of these are good news stories, good news stories, the quotation marks, in that we are getting some action on some of these buildings. I think 325 Elgin is a good example, a sad example, because, the building is in not great shape, but we have used the tools that we have at hand and work together from a staff perspective to ensure the protection of these buildings, which is something that this committee and council has told us is important to them, and ensuring public safety as well. And so we're continuing to chip away at these, I think, one by one. And if there are other buildings that you know about, please let us know. I'm not sure if our list is entirely complete because we don't patrol the streets looking for vacant heritage buildings. I have other things to do. Next slide, please. And this is my last slide, just to give you a sense of what's upcoming. We will continue to address the recommendations that came out of the March 2025 workshop that we had with the community. Some of these include the increased inspections. So our next planned inspections will be in the spring. Broader use of heritage easements and development agreements, particularly where demolition or partial demolition is proposed. We are working with our colleagues in bylaw and building code about potential updates to the website to allow for a bit more transparency about when an order has been issued, whether an owner is compliant, that sort of information. Right now, we just have kind of very baseline information about properties that are listed. And we are continuing to work with our colleagues at Global Affairs Canada on the foreign-owned properties and a variety of other matters. So that's all I had for you today. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, or at least try.
Thank you so much for the presentation. You do have a number of questions, starting with Councillor Troster. And on this file, we did not receive any delegations or correspondence.
Thank you so much, Leslie. You've provided a summary of the greatest hits of derelict buildings in Centertown that I hear about all the time. You heard my audible sigh when it comes to Somerset House, because even though with some fanfare, we announced that there was a big concrete pour in the morning, I attended a community meeting where there was some very big feelings about this building that's been sitting in a derelict condition for 18 years. Similarly, I hear a lot about the church on Elgin and certainly about 330 Gilmore. So a few questions. First of all, the company that owns 33 Gilmore is currently in bankruptcy proceedings. There were a list of properties for disposal that were listed under those bankruptcy proceedings. 330 Gilmore was not one of them. Have you heard if it might be? Is there any way to know?
I have not heard, unfortunately.
Does the city, and I've asked this many times, I'm just going to ask it on the record, does the city have a tool at its disposal to force or encourage owners of these properties to develop them or to develop them faster?
Sorry, I'm pausing. I think the city has a wide toolbox of things that we can use to try to incentivize development of these properties. But aside from allowing demolition of these buildings, I think it may be difficult to sort of push things forward faster. You know, we have tools like the Heritage Community Improvement Plan, which offers, a tax incentive grant related to rehabilitation of the buildings of up to $500,000. We last year put in place an exemption in the DC bylaw related to derelict buildings to sort of allow for them to receive the credits that they would have gotten if they were not derelict, if they're designated under the Ontario Heritage Act. So there are a number of tools we have, but I think ultimately we don't have anything to force an owner to develop a property.
Correct. And that is a source of incredible frustration in the community because one derelict building can have an impact on the whole street. I know, so certainly Somerset House, and certainly 330 Gilmore is having that impact. So really our only tool is if something is falling apart and dangerous, we do the work and charge the owner back. That's the only financial disincentive currently.
Primarily, yes.
Okay. Is there another tool you wish you had that council should consider in the next term?
I don't think I can answer that today. I think I'd have to do some research.
Okay. Yeah. No, I know both Councillor Plant and I have floated the idea of a vacant commercial unit tax. I think we need stronger tools to incentivize the development of this property. I won't name which one, but the owner of one of them has basically told me it's already been empty for 20 years. He's content to leave it empty for another 20 until the city eventually lets him knock it all down. It's demolition by neglect. He has no current financial incentive to develop it, and it's impacting an entire block of Centertown, right? So it's very, very frustrating. But I do want to thank you for your work, and I will share this progress. The slow pace of redevelopment of Somerset House is a constant topic of conversation in the neighborhood, and people are very cynical and not believing that it's actually going to happen. So I appreciate the patience of Ottawa Heritage staff for continuing to very slowly move this project along. And I keep telling people, I have no tool to make him go faster. I really don't. And I really wish I did. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those questions and comments. Member Madigan.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Leslie, for the update. It's good to know what's happening. I'm sort of astounded that the buildings on St. Patrick's Street are still standing up. When we were presented those for emergency demolition, it was presented that they were ready to fall down on someone and kill them or injure them. But they're still standing. Perhaps the condition of the buildings was a bit overstated to get the permission to demolish them. Is it possible that the city can go in, stabilize them, and do maintenance and perhaps extend the life of these until someone who could renovate the buildings to some extent or save some of them could happen in the future? I don't think demolition, perhaps it's the solution. If the buildings are still standing, there might be some life still in them that if they're stabilized, they could be saved, or not all, but perhaps some of them. That's I don't know if you have a response to that, but that's sort of my statement to seeing those buildings still there after we did the emergency demolition approval.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can understand the member's frustration. I'm going to ask my colleague Scott Lockhart from Building Code Services, who's on the call virtually, to speak to this piece, please.
Good morning. So through Mr. Chair, just want to acknowledge some of the comments about the building. So I see the perception of that, and we often do get that type of feedback when it comes to an engineering report, like perhaps if it was from one party that it could be favorable to whatever condition they want. But the building has been reevaluated a couple times. Building Code Services' role is to make sure that the building is secure. So that secure could be that it could be shored and left in place and pose no risk to adjacent buildings. We exercise the possibility of demolition if, say, for example, the engineer or whatever consultants are involved are suggesting that the building cannot be repaired or it's not feasible, meaning that there's like significant deterioration to the wood structure in the building. So essentially, you couldn't just do a re and re. The building would be dissected to almost nothing just to be able to have, the components to reassemble it. So for that reason, the engineers had pushed for the demolition of it. There are a couple of reasons why nothing had happened beyond that. In fact, Leslie had noted that we had only issued an order yesterday. We had actually issued orders on the property, and it was brought to our attention by legal. There was actually an issue with some of the naming reflective of the actual PIN for the property. So for that reason, we had to issue, which granted them an extra amount of time. But currently, based on the engineer's recommendations, the demolition of the buildings is the most appropriate approach, unless additional information is brought to our attention otherwise.
Thank you for that follow-up. If I recall the report, I think part of the assessment and calculation was based on it being commercially feasible to repair, economically feasible, versus you could still probably repair them, but it probably costs money that people don't necessarily want to put into it. But when we come back to like heritage buildings that we're trying to preserve the neighborhood, that aspect of the balance sort of should be reconsidered. But as I keep pointing out, it was an emergency approval. The buildings are ready to fall down. And how many months now has it been since we've done that? I think we have to reconsider these applications for emergency demolition if they don't take place right away, if it truly is not a threat to the public. Anyway, that's my comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Member Madigan, for those questions and comments. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning. So McGee House, is that on the watch list?
Yes, it is on the watch list, and it is being actively monitored on a regular basis by Building Code Services in particular.
Okay. And thus far, they have not seen any change in condition in the building. I get relatively frequent notes from residents who are concerned that they're seeing new bulges, new cracks, et cetera. But is it the department's opinion that it's continues to be safe?
Yes, that's my understanding, but I'll allow Scott the opportunity to chime in here if he has anything else to add.
Yes, I do. Thank you for the question. So we have been continuously monitoring the property. We did have a third-party engineering firm out in the fall, which provided us with a report that identified the building was secure for this winter. And so essentially we were looking at it in about 6 months intervals, except when we receive a complaint from the public, which we've also been receiving different ones or different photos. Actually, very recently, within the last week, we compared some different cracks in the mortar that were reported from some residents and confirmed that there was no additional movement. But the property is still being monitored. We expect that the engineers, the third-party engineers, will be out again in the spring, which their report referred to. And they indicated at that point that they would make any additional recommendations to demolition or further stabilization. But the gist of the last report was essentially that they didn't expect the building to survive more than this upcoming winter.
So may I just ask, how precise is your movement monitoring? I don't know whether it's just because people have spoken to me about perceived movement in the building, but when I pass by, I share their concerns at times. Is it pretty rigorous?
It is, and I don't want to discourage anyone from reporting if they think something is going wrong. I would hate for that to be the message that goes out. So we do look into it when it comes up. There are crack monitors that are in the building. So within the shell of the building, the third-party engineers installed some. We've also taken measurements of some of the more typically reported failures in the mortar. So that I guess it'd be the lower left corner along the front facade, close to where the original collapse had taken place. So there too, it's being measured, as that's the one that tends to be reported. There are dry stack stone in that building. So often what's happening is it's an aesthetic mortar that's falling out, but it's not one that's affecting the building structure.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I do appreciate the quick response you've given to residents and to my office when people are concerned that they may have seen a change in the condition of the building. Obviously, it's right there at the sidewalk, so people are worried about that. We have a recalcitrant owner on that property. I don't know the degree of success we might have in trying to push them to redevelop this property, but I appreciate the efforts to at least make sure that the community is safe. And I also want to thank Leslie for your ongoing engagement with the new owner at the Ashcroft Convent at 114 Richmond. I share your optimism that we will have a heritage-sensitive development move forward within some foreseeable time frame. So thank you. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much for the questions and the comments. And I don't see any other raised hands. So I also really want to thank staff for their work on their continuing work on the Heritage Watch list. I really want to thank staff as well for their responsiveness to the heritage community from that workshop that we had held previously with the community to listen to their concerns around increased inspections and the broader use of agreements, as well as providing more information for transparency. We hear concerns in the community all the time about properties and demolition by neglect. And so it's very important for us to have these reports, notwithstanding the fact that there might be a lack of policy tools available to council to deal with the issues before us. It's heartening to hear that the number of properties on the list are decreasing, at least, and that there is better coordination between departments concerning action on the watch list, those departments being heritage planning, building code services, and bylaw enforcement services. So I think the harmonization and working together is very important to work where we can to address challenges where we can with the policy tools that are available to us. So I really want to thank you for all the hard work, and and bringing this Heritage Watch list, frankly, to this committee. I know that members of the heritage community feel that this list is important, and it does keep in the forefront not only the challenges that we're seeing with properties deteriorating, but it also talks about the work, the hard work that city staff is undertaking to address this challenge. So I don't know whether we need to have any formal reception of this item. I don't believe so. So this presentation has been received by the committee. Our last item is pro forma, which is a status update on the Built Heritage Committee's inquiries and motions for the period ending January 13th, 2026. There are no delegations and no correspondence on that item. Is this item received?
Received.
Received. Thank you so much. There are no in-camera items. Are there any notices of motion for future meetings? Member Bourne?
I'd like to move that the criteria for designation of a HCD, being a Heritage Conservation District, be increased from 25% to 90%. Now,
So are you
hear something back?
Are you submitting a formal motion to
Yes.
the committee?
Yes.
Is it?
It's written. It's scribbled. Now, I expect that staff will come and argue that the 90% should be something different. And we'll hear that.
And of course, if you're submitting this item, you can't speak to it until it's circulated. It's a notice of motion. So once again, that notice of motion is that the criteria of designation of HDC is increased from 25% to 90%. So I'm certain we will have more discussion on that item. And of course, it will be good if this item is circulated to members in standardized format for consideration. Sorry, Member Quinn.
Yes, thank you. Perhaps Ms. Collins can clarify this, but I was under the impression that that criteria is set at the provincial level. It's not up to the municipality to decide. It's part of the Ontario Heritage Act.
It is, but a municipality can decide to set.
I'm asking my question to
we will
Ms.
have,
Collins.
we'll have
Directed my
discussion.
question to Ms. Collins.
Point of order, Chair.
Members.
Are we debating a motion right now, or can we
That's
just
right.
go ahead
Exactly.
and receive the notice and move
We're
on?
receiving notice, and there will be time to have a discussion on whether the applicability of what's before this committee. All of those things will be decided at the next meeting of this committee. Thank you,
Thank you.
Kelly, for that clarification as well. Are there? Yes. Seeing no other notices of motions, are there any inquiries? Seeing none, is there any other business? Seeing none, we are adjourned. The next meeting of the Built Heritage Committee will be on Tuesday, February 10th, 2026. Thank you so much.